They say a mother's love is sacred, but I'll let you in on a little secret. The cruelest people in the world don't wear villain costumes. They show up at family dinners, they smile for the camera, and they leave their children on doorsteps like yesterday's mail. Welcome back to Dad's True Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every chance to do the right thing. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to need to hear what happens when the grandfather finds out. I'm that grandfather. My name is Arthur Vance. I'm 73 years old, and I own the resort your daughter-in-law's been bragging about at book club for the last 3 years. The one with the infinity pool and the spa that costs more than most people's mortgages. What you don't know, what she definitely didn't know, is that the night she dropped my granddaughter on my doorstep with a small suitcase and a note that said, "I can't do this anymore," I was already on the phone with the resort's management company, buying out every room for the next morning. Not for a vacation, for a lesson. And by the time the sun came up, that lesson was already in progress. Let me tell you about my daughter-in-law Miranda, not the version she posts on Instagram, but the version who arrived at my front door at 11:07 on a Tuesday night with my 6-year-old granddaughter Emily and a look on her face I hadn't seen since my late wife's funeral. That look of someone who has already decided the thing you love most is disposable. My son David died 3 years ago. Construction accident, steel beam, wrong place, wrong second. The kind of call that splits your life into before and after like a clean axe chop. Miranda was devastated at the funeral, or at least she did a convincing impression of it. I never quite bought it, but grief looks different on everyone, and I wasn't about to judge a widow while I was still learning to breathe again myself. So I let her have the benefit of the doubt, which turns out is just another way of saying I paid for it later. After David passed, Miranda kept Emily at arm's length from me, not all at once. The visits got shorter. The phone calls went to voicemail. She'd cancel last minute with excuses that were probably true in the technical sense, but you know how it is when you're a grandparent. You learn the difference between a scheduling conflict and a closed door. By year 2, I was seeing Emily maybe 4 times a year, supervised like I was a stranger at a custody exchange instead of a grandfather who taught her how to ride a bicycle in my own driveway. I never pushed too hard because I thought I was being respectful of a grieving mother. In reality, I was being played by a woman who was already mentally checking out of motherhood. I want to be clear, I'm not a poor old man living on Social Security. I built Vance Hospitality Group from a single motel outside Asheville in 1978 into a chain of 17 luxury properties across 6 states. We own the resort Miranda's been booking for the last 2 years, the Sandalwood on Hilton Head, and 12 others that would make her eyes pop if she ever bothered to Google my name instead of filtering my emails to spam. But I learned a long time ago that the power of invisibility is the best asset a wealthy man can have. I drive a 12-year-old Ford pickup. I wear suspenders that my late wife bought me 20 years ago. I live in the same 3-bedroom ranch where I raised David, not because I can't afford better, but because when you look like a gardener, people hand you their secrets without thinking. Miranda never asked a single question about my finances. She assumed, and I let her. That assumption is the reason she stood on my porch that Tuesday night with Emily clutching a small pink suitcase and a stuffed rabbit named Barnaby, tears cutting tracks through the dirt on her cheeks. Emily's cheeks, not Miranda's. Miranda's face was dry and resolute. The note she handed me was folded once, handwritten on stationery I recognized from the spa where she works reception. It said, "I can't do this anymore. David's gone and I can't pretend I'm cut out for this life. She's better off with you. Don't come looking, I'm leaving town." She didn't say it out loud. She just pressed the paper into my hand, kissed Emily on the top of the head without a single word of comfort, and walked back to her car. Emily stood silent, shivering in pajamas that had unicorns on them, watching her mother's taillights disappear around the corner. There is a kind of rage that doesn't yell. It goes very, very quiet. I stood on that porch for maybe a full minute, holding that note, holding Emily's hand, and I felt the same stillness I felt the day I signed my first acquisition deal. The calm of a man who has been handed a problem that can be solved, not by shouting, but by architecture. I brought Emily inside, made her hot chocolate with extra marshmallows, wrapped her in the Afghan my wife crocheted before David was born, and sat her on the couch with Barnaby. Then I made 2 phone calls. The first was to my lead counsel, Marlene, 71 years old, stone cold, and legally terrifying in 3 states. I told her to prepare an emergency custody filing and to quietly investigate Miranda's romantic life, because a woman who abandons her child on a Tuesday night isn't running from grief. She's running towards something. The second call was to the general manager of the Sandalwood Resort. I asked him how many rooms were occupied. He told me. I asked how many were available. He told me. Then I said, book every single unoccupied room under corporate hold starting tomorrow morning and cancel one specific reservation. Miranda Harlow, ring any bells? He confirmed she and her +1 were due to check in at 10 a.m. New boyfriend. I'd seen him on her Facebook before she blocked me. Tyler something, a real estate agent with a spray tan and the kind of confidence that evaporates when a bill arrives. I didn't cancel her reservation. I just made sure that when she arrived, every other room on the property would be unavailable except one, the owner's suite, the room I designed for myself when I built the place in 2014, the room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlantic, a private elevator, and an unobstructed view of exactly who holds the cards. By 5 a.m. the next morning, I had custody papers drafted, a financial background check on Tyler showing $18,000 in credit card debt, and a resort fully booked under my name. I woke Emily gently, told her we were going on a little trip, and helped her pack the pink suitcase with the clothes her mother hadn't bothered to wash. We drove to Hilton Head in my pickup, Barnaby riding shotgun. I didn't tell Emily why we were going. I didn't need to. Children who have been abandoned learn to stop asking questions, and that silence is the saddest sound I've ever heard. We arrived at 9:30. The valet recognized me, of course, but I'd instructed the staff to act as though I was just another guest. I checked into the owner's suite, settled Emily with room service pancakes and cartoons, and put on the blazer I keep in the truck for board meetings. Beige, single vent, tailored to hide the fact that I carry a .45 when the situation calls for it. I didn't think I'd need it today. Violence isn't the point of this story. Calculation is. At 9:58, the front desk called up. Mr. Vance, Ms. Harlow's vehicle has just entered the property. I walked to the lobby, stood by the grand piano where the light hits just right, and waited. Miranda walked through the revolving door in white linen, sunglasses pushed up on her head, Tyler's hand on the small of her back. She was laughing. I want you to hold on to that image. A woman laughing 24 hours after abandoning her child. She saw me in the lobby. The laugh died midair. Tyler kept walking 2 steps before he noticed she'd stopped. I didn't wave. I didn't scowl. I just stood there, hands in my pockets, and said 4 words that would take the rest of the morning to fully unpack. Welcome to my resort. If this story hits close to home, or you want to see how it ends, hit subscribe. Because what comes next is the part Miranda never saw coming, and honestly, neither did I. Miranda's face went through 5 emotions in about 3 seconds, none of them flattering. Confusion first, because I was standing in a resort lobby that charged $1,200 a night, wearing my usual beige blazer that she'd mocked at Christmas 2 years ago as quaint. Then recognition, the slow horror of putting pieces together without enough edges. Then a flash of anger that someone like me would dare to be somewhere like this. Then fear, real fear, the kind that makes your mouth go dry. And finally, the mask, the tight smile she wore whenever she was about to lie to someone's face. Arthur, she said, voice pitched for the lobby, for Tyler, for the concierge pretending not to watch. What a small world. I didn't know you vacationed here. I don't vacation here, I said. I own it. The concierge chose exactly that moment to clear his throat and hand Miranda a leather-bound folio. Ms. Harlow, I'm afraid there's been an issue with your reservation. Our systems are showing no availability for the room type you booked. However, Mr. Vance has very generously. Generously, Tyler repeated, speaking for the first time, drawing the word out like he was tasting it for trapdoors. He had the kind of smile that real estate agents practice in the mirror, all teeth and no warmth. And what does Mr. Vance do exactly? I didn't answer him directly. I looked at Miranda. Your boyfriend asked me a question, Miranda. Would you like to answer it for him, or should I? She didn't answer. Her knuckles were white on her handbag strap. So I turned to Tyler and extended my hand, the way you'd greet a business acquaintance whose credit report you'd read an hour ago. Arthur Vance, I said, founder and sole owner of Vance Hospitality Group, that includes this resort and 12 others, and the property management company that handles your rental listings in Beaufort. You're Tyler Dennison. You sold a split level on Elm Street last month for 6% under asking because you needed the commission to cover a balloon payment on a personal loan. How am I doing so far? Tyler's hand, which had been halfway to mine, stopped moving. His smile flickered, rebooted, failed. Miranda, what is this? This is a conversation, I said, that should have happened before you abandoned my granddaughter on my doorstep with a note and no forwarding address. But we're having it now, in my lobby, under my roof, at a resort where, as it happens, every single room is fully booked for the next 4 days except one, the owner's suite, which I am offering to you free of charge on one condition. Miranda's voice came out thin and sharp. Where is Emily? I let the question sit in the air between us. Emily is in the owner's suite right now, eating room service pancakes and watching cartoons. She slept in a king-sized bed last night with clean sheets and a stuffed rabbit that still smelled like your perfume from the last time you bothered to hold her. She didn't cry, Miranda, not once. Do you want to know why I think she didn't cry? Miranda didn't answer. Because she's 6 years old and she's already learned that her mother's affection has conditions. That's not a child's instinct. That's a lesson. Someone taught her that. I wonder who. Tyler shifted his weight. The man was clearly doing calculations in his head, trying to figure out whether he'd walked into a scene he could spin or one that was already closed. He settled on damage control. Okay, look, obviously there's some family stuff happening that I'm not up to speed on. Miranda, maybe we should just go somewhere else. There are other hotels. There are, I agreed. But there's also the matter of the emergency custody petition my attorney filed at 7:15 this morning in Beaufort County Family Court. Miranda Harlow, you have been named as a respondent in a petition for temporary sole custody of Emily Harlow Vance on grounds of willful abandonment. I reached into my blazer and produced a manila envelope. I didn't hand it to her. I placed it on the marble check-in counter between us the way you place a chess piece, not a threat, but the announcement of one. Inside this envelope are copies of the filing, also an affidavit from a neighbor, Mrs. Delgado, who witnessed you loading Emily's suitcase into your car Tuesday night and overheard you say, and I quote, "I just need a fresh start. I can't drag this anchor anymore." An anchor, Miranda? You called your daughter an anchor. Tyler looked at Miranda. Something shifted behind his eyes, a calculation about his own situation that had nothing to do with loyalty and everything to do with self-preservation. I've seen that look before on the faces of business partners who realize the deal they've walked into isn't the one they signed up for. I also have, I continued, a statement from the receptionist at the spa where you work. She confirmed you've been telling co-workers for weeks that you were planning to relocate without baggage. She thought you meant furniture. She told my investigator she'd be willing to testify otherwise. Miranda's composure cracked. Not dramatically, just a small fracture at the corner of her mouth, the involuntary tick of a woman who has lied for so long she's forgotten where the truth is buried. You investigated me. Her voice had lost its lobby polish. I'm a grandfather who just watched his daughter-in-law drive away into the night without looking back. You're lucky all I did was investigate. The concierge, a young man named David who'd worked for me for 3 years and had the discretion of a priest, quietly stepped back into the office. He knew when to disappear. I appreciated that. Tyler cleared his throat. Look, this is obviously a misunderstanding. Miranda's been under a lot of stress since her husband died. She just needed a break. We were going to talk things through, make some decisions about what's best for everyone. What's best for everyone, I repeated. Is that a real estate pitch? Because I've reviewed your finances, Mr. Dennison, $18,400 in credit card debt, a car payment that's 60 days late, a foreclosure notice on a rental property you bought with an adjustable rate mortgage you didn't understand. You're not in a position to be making decisions about anyone's welfare. Frankly, I'm not sure you're in a position to be making decisions about your own. Miranda turned to Tyler. You said the properties were doing fine. You said you were just restructuring. I was going to tell you, Tyler started, but the sentence went nowhere. I watched this exchange with the same quiet satisfaction I'd felt when I closed the deal on my first hotel 45 years ago. Not because I enjoy watching people squirm, because I enjoy watching systems I've designed work exactly as intended, and I had designed this one very carefully. The night before, after I'd put Emily to bed and said goodnight to Barnaby the rabbit, because you honor the things a child loves when that child has lost everything else, I sat in my study and built a timeline. Miranda's social media posts, Tyler's real estate listings, the employment records Marlene's investigators sent over. The picture that emerged wasn't complicated. Miranda had been quietly planning an exit for months. She told her landlord she wasn't renewing the lease on the apartment, the one I'd been helping pay for, because I thought it was the right thing to do for my dead son's widow. She told her boss she was transferring, though no transfer had been filed. And Tyler, poor desperate Tyler, had been telling her they'd have a new life together in Florida, where real estate was booming and his debts wouldn't follow him. The only variable I hadn't penciled in was exactly when the abandonment would happen, but I'd known it was coming. A mother who posts a photo of her new boyfriend in Miami 3 days before she drops her child off without warning doesn't wake up Tuesday morning and have a sudden crisis of motherhood. She's been rehearsing. Here's what's going to happen, I said, and my voice was the same voice I used in boardrooms when I'd run out of patience. You're going to accept the room I've offered you. You're going to go upstairs, and you're going to sit down, and you're going to listen while I explain exactly what the next 48 hours of your life look like. Then you're going to make a decision. The decision will have consequences. I want you to understand that I am not angry, Miranda. I am not emotional. I am not some grieving father-in-law who's about to make a scene in a resort lobby. I am a 73-year-old businessman who has spent his entire adult life learning how to structure outcomes so that everyone at the table gets exactly what they brought with them. You brought abandonment. You're going to get the result of that. Tyler opened his mouth. I held up a hand. Not you, you're not relevant to this conversation yet. You're here because Miranda invited you, and because the room she booked was under your name, and because you're about to discover that the person you thought you were going on vacation with is about to become a very different kind of liability. Miranda's eyes were wet now, but I didn't trust the tears. I'd seen her cry at David's funeral, and I'd believed those tears, and that belief had cost me 3 years of access to my granddaughter. Some people cry when they're sad. Some people cry when they realize the person they've been practicing on has finally learned their tells. I'm calling my lawyer, she said. You're welcome to call your lawyer. I'll have the front desk patch the call to the suite. But you should know that your lawyer, James Cardwell, has been in practice in Beaufort for 11 years and has never once argued a custody case against Marlene Reeves. Marlene is my attorney. She argued her first custody case before James Cardwell was born, and she has not lost a case involving grandparent custody since 1997. But please call him. It's important to me that you feel you've been treated fairly. There it was, the full weight of what I'd just laid on the table, and I hadn't raised my voice. Miranda looked at the envelope on the counter. She looked at Tyler, whose tan had faded 2 shades lighter since he walked in. She looked at the lobby, the grand piano, the chandelier that cost more than her annual salary, and I watched her do the math. One condition, she said quietly. You said there was one condition. The mask was gone. In its place was the face of a 34-year-old woman who had just discovered that the old man in the beige blazer wasn't a character in her story. She was a character in his. The condition, I said, is that you spend the next hour sitting at a table with your daughter, explaining yourself. Not to me, to Emily. I don't need an explanation. I've already figured it out. But she does. She's been asking me since Tuesday night why her mommy went away, and I don't have the answer, you do. I paused. The next part was important. And if at the end of that hour, you can look that child in the eyes and tell her why she wasn't enough for you to stay, then you'll be free to leave. I won't stop you. I won't pursue the custody hearing. I'll let you walk out of this resort and out of her life, because a mother who can look her child in the eye and justify abandonment is a mother who shouldn't have been a mother in the first place. And Emily deserves to know that, to have the closure, to understand that it was never about her. It was always about you. Miranda's hand found Tyler's arm, a reflex. He didn't pull away, but I saw the hesitation. The man was running his own calculations, $18,000 in debt, a foreclosure notice, a girlfriend who had just been revealed as a documented child abandoner with a custody filing that was about to go public. Tyler Dennison was a man who sold houses for a living, and he was standing in one right, now watching the foundation crack. "The room number," I said to the concierge, who had materialized precisely when I raised my hand, "is the Sandpiper Suite, top floor. The elevator code is Emily's birthday. Miranda, you'll remember it. It's the same date you posted on Instagram last year with the caption, 'My whole world.'" I turned and walked toward the elevator, not away from them, toward them. I expected them to follow. They did. And nobody in that lobby, not Miranda, not Tyler, not the bellman frozen mid-step with a luggage cart, had any idea that the hardest part of this morning hadn't even started yet. Because upstairs, curled up on a couch that cost more than the house Miranda grew up in, sat a 6-year-old girl who still believed her mother loved her. And I was about to ask Miranda to prove it, or shatter it, and I had no idea which one was worse. The elevator doors opened onto a hallway so quiet you could hear the ocean through the walls, and Miranda walked toward that suite like a woman being led to a sentencing she didn't yet understand. Tyler followed 2 steps behind her, phone already in his hand, thumbs scrolling through messages he'd been ignoring since the lobby. I watched him in the brass reflection of the elevator panel. The man was looking for an exit, not a door, but a reason. People like Tyler always find one, and they always call it logic. The Sandpiper Suite sits at the end of the east wing, floor-to-ceiling windows facing the Atlantic, the kind of room that makes you feel like you're standing on the edge of the world with all your mistakes laid out behind you. I'd had it designed that way on purpose. A decade of hosting business negotiations had taught me that a room with a view of something immense makes people feel small, and people who feel small are more inclined to tell the truth. I opened the door. Emily was exactly where I'd left her, curled into the corner of the sectional with Barnaby tucked under her chin, the remains of a pancake breakfast on the coffee table, some cartoon I didn't recognize playing softly on the television. She looked up when the door opened, and I need to describe what happened next very carefully because it's the part I keep coming back to. Emily saw her mother, and for exactly 1 second her whole face lit up the way a child's face lights up when the person they love most walks into a room. Then she remembered. The porch, the taillights, the silence, and the light just disappeared. Not dramatically, not with tears, just switched off, like someone had thrown a breaker behind her eyes. She pulled Barnaby closer and said nothing. That silence, that specific silence, was louder than anything Miranda had said all morning. Miranda stopped 3 steps into the room. "Hi, baby." Her voice was soft, the voice she used on Instagram stories where she wanted to look like a devoted mother. Emily didn't answer. She looked at me instead. "Is this the talk you said we were having?" she asked. My granddaughter is 6 years old, and she used the word talk like someone who had already learned that conversations in her family meant endings. I sat down on the edge of the couch beside her, close enough that she could reach me if she needed to, not so close that I was answering for her. "It is," I said. "Your mom has some things she wants to tell you. I'm going to be right here the whole time. If you want to stop, we stop. If you want me to leave, I'll leave, okay?" She nodded, the small, precise nod of a child who has been negotiating adult emotions since before she could read. Then she looked at Miranda. "Are you coming back?" 4 words, no accusations, no tears, just the question that had been sitting in her chest since Tuesday night. Miranda opened her mouth and nothing came out. I watched her reach for a version of the truth that wouldn't shatter her, and I watched her discover that version didn't exist. Tyler, still standing by the door with his phone, cleared his throat. "Maybe I should give you guys some space." You should stay, I said without looking at him. You're part of this now. You walked into this lobby with your hand on her back. You're going to stand there and hear what happens when the woman you're planning a future with turns out to have a past she never mentioned. Hey, I didn't sign up for. You signed up when you booked a $1,200 night room on a credit card with a $1,500 limit and used Miranda's last name on the reservation because your own name would have flagged the system. You signed up when you told her Florida would solve everything. You signed up when you drove her to my house Tuesday night and waited in the car with the engine running while she handed me that note. Yes, I know you were in the car. Mrs. Delgado's security camera caught your license plate. Tyler's face went slack. The phone slipped into his pocket. Miranda turned to stare at him, and something shifted in her expression, something that looked like the first genuine emotion I'd seen from her all morning. Betrayal, but of a very specific kind. The kind you feel when you realize you weren't the only one running a game. You told me you'd wait at the gas station, she said to Tyler. Quiet, dangerous. I didn't want anyone to see the car. I was being careful. You were being careful, Miranda repeated, by parking directly in front of a security camera. It was dark. I didn't know there was a camera. I know you didn't, I said. That's the problem. You've been making decisions without knowing things for months. Let me tell you both something about how surveillance works in a town where my family has lived for 4 generations. I know every security camera on every house within 3 blocks of my property. I know which neighbors leave their porch lights on, which ones go to bed at 9, and which ones, like Mrs. Delgado, installed a motion-activated system after her husband passed because she's 78 and lives alone and has nothing to do at night but review the footage. You were recorded arriving at 10:58, idling at the curb with your headlights off while Miranda walked my granddaughter to the door and driving away at 11:09 with her in the passenger seat. That footage is now an exhibit in a custody filing. So no, Mr. Dennison, you don't get to leave. Emily, who had been listening with the unnerving stillness of a child who understands more than adults think she does, spoke again. Mommy, who is he? Miranda looked at her daughter, then at Tyler, then at me. The web of lies she'd been spinning was now visible to everyone in the room, including the 6-year-old. He's my friend, Miranda said. We were going to take a trip together. Without me, Emily said, not a question. The room went completely still. Even the cartoon on the television seemed to fade into background noise. Miranda took a step toward the couch, and I saw Emily's shoulders tighten, not dramatically, just the small involuntary response of a child who has learned not to trust proximity. Baby, I was coming back. I just needed a few days. I was going to call you. When? Emily asked. Soon, a few days. You said that before, when you went to the beach with the man with the black car. You said you'd be back in 2 days, and you were gone for 7. Nana counted. I had not known about the beach trip. I filed it away, another piece of the pattern Miranda had been building for years. The man with the black car, not Tyler, someone before Tyler. Emily had been keeping track of her mother's disappearances the way children keep track of things they're afraid to ask about directly, with numbers, with witnesses, with Nana, whoever Nana was, a babysitter presumably, someone else who knew Miranda wasn't showing up. Miranda's composure cracked a little further. That was different. That was work. You don't work at the beach, Emily said quietly. You work at the spa, you told me. I need to pause here and tell you something about my granddaughter. She is 6 years old. She still believes in the tooth fairy. She cannot tie her own shoelaces without making a double knot that requires scissors to undo. And she just dismantled her mother's excuse with the precision of a cross-examiner who's been studying the case for weeks. She didn't learn that from me. She learned it from Miranda, from years of listening to her mother's explanations and noticing the gaps. I also want to know about the black car, I said, keeping my voice level, but we're going to address the bigger issue first. Miranda, your daughter asked you a question. Are you coming back? She deserves an answer, a real one. Miranda stood in the middle of that stunning room with the Atlantic stretching out behind her, and for the first time since I'd met her at David's engagement party 9 years ago, she looked completely undefended. No performance, no deflection, Just a woman with a child she'd tried to leave and a plan that had fallen apart before she'd even checked into her hotel. But here's the thing about people who have been running for a long time. When you corner them, they don't collapse, they pivot, and Miranda pivoted. "Arthur, can we talk privately? This isn't appropriate to discuss in front of her." The time for appropriate was Tuesday night when you kissed her on the head and walked away without a single word of explanation. You made it her business, now it's her meeting. She's sick, sir. She's the only person in this room who has told the truth since she walked through the door. Don't patronize her. Tyler, who had been silent for a full minute, suddenly spoke with the frantic energy of a man who had finally found his angle. "Look, I'm not part of this family. I didn't know about any abandonment stuff. Miranda told me she had full custody, that the grandfather was unstable. That's why we were moving to Florida to get away from." "Unstable," I said. The word landed in the room like a dropped glass. Miranda closed her eyes. "You told him I was unstable." I had to explain why we were leaving. I couldn't tell him the truth. I couldn't tell anyone the truth. "What truth?" I asked. The question hung there. Miranda didn't answer, so I answered for her. "The truth that you've been collecting survivor benefits from Social Security for Emily since David died. $1,142 a month, deposited directly into an account you opened in your name only. The truth that you haven't spent $1 of that money on Emily's care for at least 8 months, because I've been paying for her preschool, her groceries, her clothes, her medical bills. The truth that the account balance as of this morning is $17,300, which you were planning to use as a down payment on a condo in Tampa that Tyler found for you in March." I reached into my blazer and produced another envelope, smaller this time, white, unremarkable, the kind of envelope that doesn't look like anything until you open it and realize it holds the architecture of someone's undoing. This is a summary of the bank records. I obtained them legally because I am the one who established that account. It was a custodial account. You were the custodian. You were supposed to use it for Emily's needs. Instead, you've been siphoning it. That's fraud, Miranda. That's a felony. Miranda's face went white. Tyler took a step backward toward the door, realized there was nowhere to go, and stopped. "You can't prove I didn't spend it on her. I bought things, clothes, food. I have receipts for everything I've paid for over the last 8 months. I also have documentation from the preschool confirming you haven't paid tuition since November. I paid it. I have the canceled checks. The math is not in your favor." Emily looked up from the couch. "What's a felony?" I had forgotten for just a moment that she was listening. I knelt down beside the couch so my eyes were level with hers. "It's a very serious problem, sweetheart. It means someone broke an important rule and there are consequences. You don't need to worry about that right now. What you do need to know is that nobody is going to make you go anywhere you don't want to go. You're safe here, I promise." She considered this, then looked at her mother. "Did you break a rule, Mommy?" Miranda opened her mouth, and for the first time, her voice broke. "I made some mistakes." "Papa says mistakes are okay if you fix them," Emily said. "Did you fix them?" The question was so pure, so devastating in its simplicity, that even I felt it hit my chest. Miranda looked at her daughter, then at the envelope in my hand, then at Tyler, who was now staring at his phone with the expression of a man watching his entire future implode in real time. "No," Miranda said, "I haven't fixed them yet." And then Emily did something I will never forget as long as I live. She picked up Barnaby, walked across the room, and placed the rabbit in her mother's lap. "He helps me when I'm sad," she said. "You can borrow him, but you have to give him back. He's mine." What do you do when a 6-year-old offers grace to the person who abandoned her? What do you do when the child you're trying to protect turns out to be the most emotionally mature person in the room? I will tell you what I did. I stood very still and let that moment breathe, because I understood, suddenly and completely, that Emily was not the victim I had been picturing. She was the survivor, and survivors get to decide how their story ends. Miranda looked down at the threadbare rabbit with its one missing eye and its fur worn smooth from years of being held. Her tears finally came, real ones this time, not the performance tears from the lobby. She didn't wipe them away. Tyler's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, and whatever he saw made his face drain. He stepped toward Miranda. "Miranda, we have a problem. The bank just froze our accounts, all of them, including the joint savings." I hadn't done that. I hadn't even thought to do that. But then I realized who had. Marlene, my attorney. She hadn't just filed the custody petition. She'd filed an emergency asset freeze as part of a fraud investigation. The woman was 71 years old, and she thought 5 moves ahead of everyone else in the room, including me. "That would be the fraud investigation," I said calmly. "The one that automatically triggers when a custodial account shows irregular activity and a related custody filing hits the system. I didn't request it. The bank did. Your bank, Tyler, the one that's been sending you overdue notices for 3 months. They saw the filing, they saw the transactions, and they made a decision." "What transactions?" Miranda's voice was sharp now, panic cutting through the tears. Tyler said nothing, so I opened the second envelope, the one I hadn't planned to open yet. "The transactions where Tyler transferred $6,000 from your joint savings into a personal account he didn't tell you about. The one connected to an online gambling platform. He's been making deposits every week since February. I have the records. I wasn't going to show you this today. I was going to wait until after you'd spoken with Emily. But I think you deserve to know exactly who you were planning to move to Florida with." Miranda turned to Tyler, and for the first time all morning, she looked at him the way she should have looked at him from the beginning, like he was a stranger. "Tell me that's not true." Tyler's mouth opened and closed twice. The real estate smile was gone. In its place was the face of a man who had run out of surfaces to hide behind. "It was a temporary thing. I was going to put it back." $6,000, Miranda said slowly. "You took $6,000 from our account, the account we were going to use for the condo you said you'd already put a deposit on." "I did put a deposit, I just used some other money for it. I was going to cover the difference before closing." "There is no condo deposit," I said. "I checked. There's no condo, there's no closing, there's no job waiting for you in Tampa. There's a rental application that was denied because your credit score dropped below 550 last month. Tyler wasn't moving you to Florida, Miranda. He was running from his creditors, and he was using your savings to fund his escape." The room was very quiet. Emily had returned to the couch and was watching all of this with the detached curiosity of a child who doesn't fully understand the words, but understands perfectly the shape of the thing they're describing. Something had broken. Something had been false the whole time. Miranda removed her hand from Tyler's arm, a small gesture, but final. "You need to leave," she said to him, "now." "Miranda, I can explain." "You can explain from somewhere else. I'm done listening to explanations." Tyler looked at me, I looked back. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. The man had just been exposed as a gambling addict who'd stolen from his girlfriend and lied about their entire future. He didn't need me to add judgment. The room was already doing it for him. He left, the door clicked shut behind him, and the sound echoed through the suite like a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence nobody had expected to end that way. Miranda sat down heavily on the armchair by the window. Barnaby was still in her lap. She looked at the rabbit, then at Emily, then at me. "What happens now?" she asked. I walked to the window and looked out at the ocean. The sun was higher now, glinting off the water in 1,000 small points of light. Somewhere down on the beach, a family was setting up umbrellas, normal life continuing. "That depends," I said, "on what you tell your daughter next. I've given you the evidence I have. The legal consequences are already in motion. But the one thing that hasn't been decided, the only thing that matters to the person on that couch, is whether you can look at her and tell her the truth. Not the version you tell yourself, not the version you told Tyler. The actual truth about why you left, about whether you were planning to come back, about whether you love her enough to stop pretending." Miranda turned to Emily. The little girl was watching her mother with a stillness that made my chest ache. She had Barnaby back now, retrieved silently at some point when I wasn't looking, and she was holding him against her chest like a shield. "Baby girl," Miranda started, and her voice was raw in a way I hadn't heard since the day we buried David. "I'm so sorry. I thought I couldn't do it anymore. I thought I wasn't good enough to be your mom. I thought you'd be better off without me. I was wrong. I was so wrong. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to fix it if you'll let me." Emily listened. She didn't nod. She didn't smile. She didn't run into her mother's arms the way children in movies do when the music swells. She just listened, processing, the way she'd been processing everything since Tuesday night. Then she said, "You can't leave again. Papa, can you make sure she can't leave again?" I looked at Miranda. Miranda looked at me. "I can," I said, "make sure that the legal custody arrangement protects you. I can make sure that if your mom wants to see you, it happens in a way that's safe and consistent. But I can't make her stay. Nobody can. That's a choice she has to make every single day from now on. And you get to decide, as you get older, how much you want her in your life. That's your choice, not hers. Do you understand?" Emily nodded slowly. Then she looked at her mother. "Okay," she said, "but you have to say sorry to Barnaby too. He was scared." And that right there is the moment I understood that my granddaughter was going to be just fine. Not because the adults had solved everything. Not because the legal strategy was airtight. But because she had found a way to express her own hurt through the safety of a stuffed rabbit, and she had demanded accountability on her own terms. This story isn't over. The custody hearing is still pending. The fraud investigation is still open. Miranda is going to have to answer for what she did, legally and personally, and that process will take months. But in that room, with the ocean stretching out behind us and a 6-year-old holding her mother to a standard most adults can't meet, the outcome that mattered had already been decided. Emily had been abandoned, but she had not been broken. And the resort I'd bought years ago, the empire I'd built from a single motel outside Asheville, turned out to have one function I'd never planned for. It became a fortress, not of walls, but of leverage. And sometimes, when you're protecting someone small, leverage is the same thing as love. We stayed in that suite for 3 more hours, and in that time, Miranda Harlow did something she hadn't done in 3 years. She told the truth, all of it. The black car belonged to a man named Paul, a pharmaceutical sales rep she'd met at a conference in Charlotte 14 months after David died. That relationship lasted 6 months, ended badly, and was the first time she'd left Emily with a sitter for an entire week without checking in. The beach trip Emily remembered, the one where Nana counted days, that had been Paul. There had been others after him, brief things, distractions. Men who didn't know she had a daughter until it was too late to matter. And underneath all of it, underneath the boyfriends and the disappearances and the Instagram posts carefully cropped to exclude her child, was something I hadn't expected to feel. Grief. Real, untouched, festering grief. Miranda had loved my son. Not perfectly, not consistently, but genuinely. And when he died, she had no idea what to do with the hole he left, except try to fill it with anyone who looked at her twice. "That's not an excuse," she said, sitting on the floor now, Barnaby still in her lap, her back against the window. "I know it's not an excuse. I just want you to understand. I didn't stop loving Emily. I stopped believing I was capable of loving anyone. David was the only person who ever made me feel like I wasn't broken. When he died, I thought the broken part was all that was left." Emily listened from the couch, her knees pulled up to her chin. She didn't interrupt. She didn't cry. She just absorbed, the way dry earth absorbs water after a drought, not all at once. Slowly, reluctantly, unsure whether this was real nourishment or another flood about to wash everything away. I asked Miranda about the survivor benefits, about the fraud, about whether she understood that what she'd done wasn't just morally wrong but legally prosecutable. She nodded, head down, and said something that surprised me. "I know I've known for months. I kept thinking I'd fix it before anyone found out. I'd get the money back in the account. I'd get stable. I'd be the mother Emily deserved. But every time I got close to fixing it, I'd meet someone new, or Tyler would have another plan, or I'd convince myself that 1 more month wouldn't matter. And then suddenly it was a year. And then it was 2. And then I was standing on your porch with a note I'd written in the parking lot because I couldn't think of anything else to do." That's how abandonment works, I said. It's not one big decision, it's 1,000 small ones that all point in the same direction. The sun had moved across the suite by then, the light shifting from morning gold to afternoon white. Room service brought lunch, though nobody ate much. Emily pushed her grilled cheese around the plate. Miranda stared at her soup like it contained an answer she couldn't quite read. And then Emily asked the question I'd been dreading. "Papa, is Mommy going to jail?" I looked at Miranda. Miranda looked at me. The question was not hypothetical. In the state of South Carolina, custodial account fraud involving more than $10,000 is a felony. The investigation was already open. The bank had already frozen the accounts. The wheels were turning, and they would not stop just because a 6-year-old had asked a fair question. "Mommy made some choices that have consequences," I said carefully. "Some of those consequences are going to involve the law. But my attorney, Miss Marlene, she's very good at helping people explain their mistakes and make them right. That doesn't always mean jail. Sometimes it means paying back what was taken. Sometimes it means supervision. The important thing for you to know is that whatever happens, you are safe. You are going to stay with me. And nobody is going to take you away from the people who love you. That part is handled." "Did you handle it?" Emily asked. "I did. Like you handled the resort." I smiled, the first real smile I'd felt in days. "Yes, like I handled the resort." Emily turned to her mother. "Papa handles things. He handled the bicycle when the chain fell off, and he handled the mouse in the kitchen, and he handled the mean dog on Maple Street, so he can probably handle this too." Miranda looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite name. Gratitude, maybe, or the beginning of it, or the recognition that the man she'd dismissed as a quaint grandfather in a beige blazer had been quietly building a safety net under her daughter's life for years, and she'd never once stopped to notice. "I'm sorry," she said to me directly, "not just for Emily, for how I treated you, for keeping her away, for making you fight to see her. I was threatened by you. You were so steady, so present, and I was so lost. Every time you showed up with groceries or fixed something at the house or offered to take Emily for the weekend, it reminded me of everything I wasn't doing. And instead of thanking you, I pushed you away. I told myself you were controlling. That you wanted to take her from me, but you weren't trying to take her, you were trying to help me keep her." I let those words settle. They had been a long time coming. "I tried to help you keep her because she's my son's daughter," I said. "Because I made a promise to David the day she was born, holding her in the hospital room while you slept, that I would protect her from anything. From anything, Miranda. I didn't know that anything would eventually include you. I didn't want it to, but here we are." "Here we are," she repeated. I stood up and walked to the window. The beach was crowded now, families with umbrellas and coolers, children building sandcastles at the water's edge. Normal life, continuing alongside ours, indifferent to the reckoning happening on the top floor. "Here's what's going to happen next," I said. "You're going to call your lawyer and tell him to cooperate fully with Marlene. You're going to sign a temporary custody agreement giving me sole guardianship of Emily for the next 6 months, with supervised visitation for you on a schedule that Emily can adjust based on what she's comfortable with. You're going to begin repaying the money you took from the custodial account, every dollar, on a payment plan that Marlene will structure. And you're going to attend counseling, grief counseling, not because I'm ordering it, but because you cannot be the mother Emily needs until you face what David's death did to you." Miranda nodded slowly. "And if I do all of that, then we revisit custody in 6 months, incrementally, with benchmarks. You earn back trust by being trustworthy. There's no shortcut." "And Tyler?" "Tyler is no longer your problem. Tyler defrauded you as much as anyone. The bank investigation is going to focus on his gambling debts and the transfers he made without your knowledge. You may be called to testify. If you cooperate, it will go better for you with the fraud charges. If you protect him, it won't." She nodded again, a small precise movement that reminded me, unexpectedly, of Emily. The same tilt of the chin, the same way of processing information in silence before responding. "I'm not going to protect him. I'm done protecting people who hurt me. I think I've been doing that my whole life." I didn't answer that. It wasn't my place to answer, but I filed it away as the first genuinely self-aware thing I'd heard Miranda say since David died. Emily slid off the couch and walked over to her mother. She stood there for a moment, just looking, the way children look when they're trying to decide whether a surface is hot enough to burn them. Then she held out her hand. "Barnaby's hungry," she said. "He wants to know if you'll have lunch with us." Miranda looked down at the rabbit, then up at her daughter. Her eyes were red, her makeup was gone, her carefully constructed composure was in pieces on the floor. And for the first time in years, I saw something in her face that looked like the woman my son had loved. "I'd like that," she said, "if Barnaby's okay with it." "Barnaby's still deciding," Emily said seriously, "but he said you can sit next to me while he thinks." They sat together on the couch, the small girl and her mother, with a stuffed rabbit between them and an ocean behind them and a future ahead that was not yet written but was at least no longer being lied about. I stood at the window and watched them, and I thought about David, about the night he told me he was going to marry Miranda, about the way he'd looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. He'd have wanted this. Not the pain, not the abandonment, not the years of distance and lies, but this, the reconciliation, the truth finally in the room. Later that afternoon, I walked Miranda to the lobby while Emily stayed in the suite with a movie and a second round of room service. The concierge, David, caught my eye as we passed. I gave him a small nod. Everything handled. At the door, Miranda hesitated. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, "after everything I did." "Don't thank me yet. Thank me in 6 months when you've done the work. Thank me in a year when Emily tells me she feels safe with you again. Thank me in 5 years when she's old enough to understand what happened and she chooses to forgive you. That's when you thank me, not today." She looked at me for a long moment. "You're not what I thought you were." "No," I said, "I rarely am." She walked out into the afternoon sun, and I watched her go. Not driving away, not with taillights disappearing around a corner, walking towards something, toward the hard work of becoming a person her daughter deserved. I went back upstairs. Emily was asleep on the couch, worn out from a day that had started before sunrise and contained more emotional weight than most adults carry in a year. Barnaby was tucked under her chin. The movie played softly to no one. I sat down in the armchair by the window and watched the ocean roll in and out, the same rhythm it had been keeping since before I was born and would keep long after I was gone. Somewhere across town, Tyler Dennison was probably packing his belongings. Somewhere in a courthouse, Marlene Reeves was filing motions with the precision of a woman who'd been doing this for 50 years. And somewhere in her car, Miranda Harlow was driving home to an empty apartment and a future that looked nothing like the one she'd planned. But the only thing that mattered was curled up on a couch in a room I owned, breathing softly, safe for the first time in longer than she'd probably ever understand. That night, I called Marlene to get the status on the filings. "Everything's in motion," she said. "The fraud investigation is separate from the custody case, but they'll influence each other. If Miranda cooperates and repays, the DA's office will likely settle for restitution and probation. She's not a flight risk. She's not a career criminal. She's a widow who made terrible choices. The system has room for that when people show remorse. And if she doesn't cooperate, then we have a different conversation. But from what you've told me, I don't think that's the path she's taking." "No," I said, "I don't think it is either." "Arthur," Marlene said, her voice shifting slightly, the professional mask lifting just enough to reveal the friend beneath. "You did the right thing, not the easy thing, the right thing." "I know," I said, "that's what scares me." We hung up. I sat in the dark of the suite's second bedroom, the one Emily hadn't used the night before because she'd wanted to sleep on the couch with the windows where she could see the stars. Tomorrow I would take her home. Tomorrow we would start the real work of rebuilding a life that had been fractured by loss and neglect and the slow erosion of trust. But tonight, I just listened to the waves and let the day settle behind me. There's a version of this story where I destroyed Miranda, where I used my money and my lawyers and my evidence to crush her completely, to take Emily and walk away and leave her mother with nothing. I thought about that version. I planned for it. In the darkest hours Tuesday night, after Emily had finally cried herself to sleep, I sat at my kitchen table and mapped out exactly how I would do it. Every legal lever, every financial pressure point, every public humiliation that could be arranged. And then I looked at my granddaughter sleeping on my couch, clutching a stuffed rabbit with one missing eye, and I realized that destroying her mother wouldn't heal her. It would just teach her that when people hurt you, the right response is annihilation. That's not the lesson I wanted her to learn from the grandfather who loved her enough to build a fortress. So I built something else instead. A path back, narrow, steep, with consequences at every step, but possible. Because the best revenge against someone who abandoned a child isn't destruction. It's creating conditions where they have to face what they did day after day, while the child they threw away thrives anyway. And Emily is going to thrive. That's not a prediction, that's a plan. Before I went to bed, I checked the resort's booking system on my phone. The hold I'd placed on every room expired at midnight. Tomorrow the Sandlwood would return to normal, guests checking in and out, luggage carts rolling through the lobby, the grand piano playing the same soft jazz it always played. Nobody would know that on the top floor, in the owner's suite, a small girl had decided to give her mother another chance. Nobody would know that a 73-year-old man in a beige blazer had just completed the most important negotiation of his life. And that's exactly how I wanted it. Some victories are meant to be quiet. Some empires are built not for profit, but for protection. And some grandfathers, the ones who have been underestimated their whole lives, are the only ones who can stand in a lobby and say 4 words that change everything. Welcome to my resort. Those 4 words weren't just a greeting, they were a declaration. And everyone in that lobby, everyone in that suite, everyone who ever thought Arthur Vance was just a quaint old man in a flannel shirt and suspenders, learned something that morning that they will never forget. The quiet ones are always watching, and when the moment comes, they are already holding all the cards. I've told you this story not because it's unique, but because it's not. Approximately 7,000 children are abandoned in the United States every single year. Some are left at hospitals under safe haven laws, yes, but many more are left the way Emily was left, in the middle of the night, with a relative, with a note, with silence where an explanation should have been. The legal system catches some of these cases, social workers catch others. But a lot of them, a quiet majority, are caught by grandparents who never expected to start over at 73. I didn't expect it either, but I had spent 45 years building something that could absorb the weight when it landed. Not just money, a network, an attorney who never loses, a resort that could become a neutral ground, a pickup truck that doesn't look like much but gets you where you need to be. Most grandparents in my position don't have those things. They have love and a spare bedroom and a fixed income that was supposed to cover retirement, not pediatrician visits and new school shoes. They do the work anyway, because when the alternative is a child falling through the cracks, there isn't a choice. There is only what you're willing to do. Some people think money is power. I think that's half the equation. Money is leverage. Money is a tool. The real power, the kind that changes a child's life, is paying attention. Noticing when the visits get shorter. Noticing when the phone calls go to voicemail. Noticing when a 6-year-old stops asking questions because she's learned the answers will only disappoint her. I noticed too late for some things, but not too late for everything. And that margin, that small window between too late and just in time, is where most important things actually happen. This story ends with Miranda working to earn back trust she shattered, with Tyler facing the consequences of debts he thought he could outrun, with Emily starting first grade in the fall in a school near my house, with a grandfather who packs her lunch and checks her homework and doesn't mind that Barnaby still goes everywhere with her. It ends with custody hearings and repayment plans and grief counseling that will take years to finish. But it also ends with a 6-year-old who decided, in the middle of the hardest week of her life, to offer grace to someone who hadn't earned it yet. I didn't teach her that. I'm not sure anyone did. Maybe she was just born with more courage than the adults around her. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever been the person watching and waiting and ready for a moment nobody else saw coming, then hit that subscribe button. It helps more than you know. We tell stories here about family, about justice, about the quiet people who build things that last, and the moments when those things are finally needed. Drop a comment if you've got a Barnaby in your life. You'd be surprised how many people do. Emily's doing well, by the way. She asked me to tell you that Barnaby says hi and that she hopes you have pancakes tomorrow. I don't know why pancakes, it's just what she said. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that when a 6-year-old who's been through what she's been through offers you a pancake recommendation, you take it seriously. So take it seriously, pay attention, build quietly, and when the moment comes, be ready to say the 4 words that change everything. Thank you for being here.